Now let's talk about adaptation. And in our case, to be honest with you, they cannot be separated. Adaptation and mitigation and land health management, they go well together. Craig Leggett is sitting here. This is his slide, although I've played with it just a touch. Now this is taking some of the original IPCC work, saying what's the most bang for the buck in terms of carbon sequestration, sort of redefined by Swaminathan, who was the founder of the Green Revolution, and he presented it saying agroforestry followed by grazing management. Okay, so that's just bringing the trees in, and that's pretty logical, right? You put more trees in the system, then you're going to get more sequestration. But I want to spend a few minutes on this. In the middle, you'll see woody encroachment. Now, some of this is stuff that we battle with on a regular basis, but it's one of the places where you start to see increased carbon sequestration per hectare, per acre. And so how do we take advantage of that? And a lot of people are, through silvopastoral systems. So bringing those trees into the pasture systems. And here, this is a graph. This is actually also from Costa Rica. Degraded pasture can sequester perhaps up to 0.04 tons of carbon per hectare. And then you come down, natural pasture with high density of trees, 1.3, improved pasture with high density of trees, 2.5. So it does increase yet another quite a number of tons by adding the trees in, as long as they're not causing problems, as long as there's not a competition there. We'll talk more about that. But in Costa Rica is one of the first places where the government is actually providing 40 to 50 US dollars per hectare per year for farmers who are adopting silvopastoral practices. Now, these could be forage trees, they could be natural systems, they could be live fence. There's a number of ways to bring trees into the system. In Tanzania, there's a native system called the Ingatili system, and what they're doing is natural farmer-managed regeneration. So trees are coming up, they're protecting them from the livestock. Once they're big enough, they ensure that they continue to grow, but they also can manage livestock within these systems, and they've rehabilitated 500,000 hectares. So there's a lot of impressive pieces. I think this slide in Sarah's as well. This is Acacia albida, and I know several people in the room know this tree, but it drops its leaves in the rainy season. So it doesn't compete with crops. And this is really exciting because it's a legume, it's giving a nutritional value to the soil and to the crops and to the pastures if they are under there as well. And it's not competing for water either, because it's going dormant when everything else is trying to grow. This is fantastic, and we're starting to see it. You can't see that there. 5 million hectares in Niger. This is what it looks like during the growing season. The trees have lost their leaves. Those light-colored spots are the Phyderbia. And this is holding a lot of promise, and it's becoming more and more adopted across southern and eastern Africa. Well, actually, across sub-Saharan Africa. This is a picture I took on a smallholder farm in Tanzania. This farmer, 2 hectares, was looking at all these grasses, to see what was he going to get from his goats that he was raising. So right now, scientists really do need to take stock of what are those species that increase sequestration, that bring a higher nutrition value to the livestock, because we do know that better nutrition reduces enteric fermentation, reduce emissions, just said that, and have other attributes that may be of use. So there's a way of looking that's called analog sites. You look at your projections for your neighborhood out into the future, and then you go where it's like that already. And you say, what do those plants look like? What is that system? How are they managing that? And you can start to adapt. So there's a lot of good work on that. Now, how do we assess the changes that we're making in carbon balance work? And I suggest that we need to look at it in 3 ways. And again, this is Constance's view, so don't take it too deeply. Life cycle analysis, that's when we look at how much CO2 per kilogram of product. You look across the supply chain, across the value chain, and you say, okay, how can we make this system more efficient? But you also have most farmers, most ranchers, particularly in the countries that we work in, they don't have just one product. They have a farming system. So you have to know what's going on in the whole farming system. And that's kind of a land-based approach. So saying, if I add the trees and the crops and the manure and bring it all together, what's my balance? And then there's the landscape assessments, which Sarah has championed. And this is the wave of the future, because we can't do everything at the tightest level. These first two are very data intensive. So this is an example of reducing the carbon footprint in Costa Rica in a dairy system. And what they did was they brought in silvopastoral practices to reduce the amount of CO2 in the balance, if you will. Put in forage banks, etc. And you can make a lot of changes on the food system in terms of the value chain, but also shortening the food miles is what I heard Courtney say. And that's these local food systems, and how do we work in that context. But if you can make a great change in that efficiency using land management practices. Now, assessing soil carbon accumulation, there are people in this room who know a lot more about it than I do, but some of the arguments, soil is highly variable. You know that from your own ranches. Soil carbon has a fixed timeline. They say it's going to saturate. That, to me, is not an argument. If I can spend 25 years building it, you guys be working on some other strategies, but let's do it. Let's take advantage of it. Taking the measurements is intensive, and you have to have it. You have to have measurement, monitoring, and verification in order to have sort of, quote-unquote, proof of purchase. And it's not yet accepted in the trading mechanism. We may be looking more at practice-based reductions so that you can generalize around the practice that you're putting in place and what does that mean in terms of sequestration or reduction in greenhouse gas emission. And there's some people arguing completely against taking soil samples. Let's just do it all with above-ground biomass. So the jury's out. We've known how to measure soil carbon for 50 years, maybe longer. But right now, is my protocol better than your protocol? And that's really disturbing. So, and just as an example of one protocol that's better than others, sentinel site surveillance. This is the work that we're doing at the World Agroforestry Center now, which is taking these sites that give you a sense of what's happening in 100-kilometer square blocks and getting the soil below ground and above ground soil carbon, and now they're also matching it with socioeconomic data. And this is very, very useful for understanding the landscape level changes from the soil perspective.